And I call on Graham Day to be followed by Russell Finlay. Mr Day.
Rare indeed, Presiding Officer, to be encouraged to avoid brevity. Presiding Officer, can I, as Edward Mountain did, warmly welcome today's debate. As a Parliament, we've established a pattern of general debates around the armed forces and veterans community and their needs, expanded upon perhaps only when we're considering the content of occasional reports by the Veterans Commissioner. So to have the chance to drill down into a key particular aspect of all of this, I think is quite useful. And I say that from a deeply personal perspective, because 2 years on from ending my tenure as Veterans Minister, I still retain a very keen interest in all matters armed forces and veterans community-wise. And I very much look forward to interrogating the progress made regarding employment of the 2,000 or so serving personnel who leave the military and settle in Scotland each year, not to mention their families. The progress that's been made, of course, is entirely down to partnership working between governments, local and national, the public and private sectors, and, of course, our veterans' charitable sector. But let's be candid about something. This isn't just about doing the right thing by these groups. If we're honest, it's also about exploiting a talent source that none of us can afford to ignore. I'm all for acknowledging publicly those employers who make a virtue of recruiting from the armed forces community, but we should be clear that they do this not out of altruism, but because they have recognised they are sourcing from a skilled and reliable employment pool. A few years ago, BT conducted a survey of their workforce. They looked at the attributes of the veterans cohort set against the wider workforce. They discovered the former had a 40% better attendance record. So well done those firms and organisations who have a track record in this area. But let's see their involvement for what it is, a reflection of the employability of the individuals being produced by the services. And what we need is more of these businesses and organisations, public and private sector, evangelising on the benefits of hiring from the forces. And I know the Scottish Government are actively encouraging that. However, having said all of that, let me pay tribute to those employers who have looked beyond just those leaving the services and have sought to provide employment opportunities for spouses and partners of serving personnel, of which Barclays would be a fine example. Because it can be extremely difficult for those spouses and partners to find worthwhile jobs when they have had to leave behind family support networks and have childcare responsibilities to consider. Of all the visits I made and the groups I met during my tenure as Veterans Minister, few left as lasting an impression as those which involved the partners and spouses of serving personnel, be that at Faz Lane or the self-help can-do hub set up at Lookers. If we owe our servicemen and women every assistance to secure gainful employment when they move on, then our obligation to their spouses and partners, while as they remain in service, is no less. And that's why I very much welcome the positive relationship which continues between the Scottish Government and the Forces Families Federation and the ongoing involvement in the Forces Families Jobs website. The Federation, I think, as many of us know here, do sterling work promoting and advocating for those they represent. I'm pleased, Presiding Officer, to note the way in which a particular Scottish Government initiative has morphed since 2018, and that's around work that was designed to make it easier for employers and educational institutions to recognise the skills and expertise of those leaving the forces. Initially, that took the form of giving military, specifically infantry qualifications, a civilian translation, and that served those affected well. But it's been developed into a more holistic approach, and we now have the SCQF Military Skills and Qualification Discovery tool that the Cabinet Secretary referenced earlier, which I think I'm right in saying now covers 45 job roles all told. I should though acknowledge, and this refers to Martin Whitfield's initial point, I should acknowledge the clear progress that's been made by the Army, for example, in career development work and furnishing their personnel with formal qualifications, which will aid them when it comes to finding work when they leave. The Army has historically been lax in this regard, perhaps fearful that to provide these qualifications would encourage people to leave at a time where retention and recruitment remains a very big issue. But on a recent visit, to the same visit that Paul Sweeney made to Lookers Station, I was very heartened to hear direct from serving personnel of the qualification opportunities and indeed the encouragement to go for those qualifications they were receiving. Going back to that subject of morphing, of course, the Veterans Employability Strategic Group has also undergone considerable change since the Cabinet Secretary established it in 2017. Not the least significant change was the adoption of a new co-chair approach involving the appointment of Sue Bonfrey, who was then an HR Director at Barclays. As Keith Brown's successor, I made that appointment, having been hugely impressed by the work Sue had led at Barclays around employing veterans, but just as importantly, spouses. The ambition was to have more private sector employers involved, not just those from the public and third sectors. And I hope the Cabinet Secretary, in closing, might be able to tell us of the progress the VESG has led. Otherwise, I'm going to regret highlighting my role in the changes that I noted. Presiding Officer, one of the limited number of positives to come out of the pandemic was the Scottish Government as an institution seeing up close just how multi-skilled our armed forces are. I well recall meeting with a group of Army logistics experts operating out of St Andrews House who'd been drafted in to support the NHS around distribution of key items. Chatting to the team, I encouraged them when they went out into the field not to compromise on their can-do attitude and approach, which they didn't. And the impression they left has been tangible. For example, I understand since 2021 around 50 veterans have joined the government staff ranks. That's welcome, and clearly there's scope to build on it. But the more this cohort's talents are experienced firsthand, the more I suspect it will be seen as an employment pool worthy of fishing in. And that goes for employers way beyond the Scottish Government itself. So I'm pleased to see the Government fulfilling its programme for government commitment to improve employment opportunities for serving personnel when their time in the forces ends, and with a particular focus on the SME sector, because it's not just large companies and organisations who would benefit from employing these individuals. So to conclude, Presiding Officer, we've made progress on improving the employment offering for spouses of serving personnel and veterans, but there is more to do. Presiding Officer.